So, welcome back, and wanting to wish you a happy Rosh Hashanah if you are celebrating, um, and also noting it's Hispanic Heritage Month. Um, and and again, if you're just joining us now after the sit, thank you for being here today. So, yeah, I was thinking, what did I want to talk about today? And first thing I thought about was how life throws us a lot of curves, and how that is something that it doesn't take a lot of practice or reading or Dharma talks to understand. And yet it's at the core of the Dharma, the core of the Buddha's teaching. So just when we think we have it all figured out or partway figured out, maybe we think we have everything arranged just how we think we'll like it, life does what it does. We experience change, anicca, in the Buddha's language, the shifting sands. And they aren't just external, but really importantly, they're internal. So, how often do we think we want it just like this? And then we get it and we're like, no, that's not quite it. I need it a little more like that. Wait, is that it? Is that what I want? Or maybe we don't even know quite what's off, but there's something that isn't right. Our relationship to what is changes before our eyes because of what is behind our eyes. And I was thinking of it being kind of like a boat, like we're a boat and we're rocking on a sort of internal sea that is in turn rocking in an ocean that is this life. So it's a lot of motion, it's a lot of movement, and it's not easy to maintain your balance in that kind of situation. So, as a newly minted elder, I look at myself that way. I'm turning 61. Maybe I've been an elder for longer. But as an elder anyway, I've been working on my physical balance, a little more aware of it. So now when I get out of the shower, I steady myself on a towel hook as I step out of the tub. And I'm a little more careful as I get dressed. And I try and hold a one-legged yoga pose for 3 minutes on each leg every day. And I've learned that that isn't very easy. Those balance poses are tricky for most of us. I watch in the yoga classes I sometimes take as even the teacher falls out of Warrior 3. So we are changing beings in motion in a world of change and motion. And so it can be hard to keep one's bearings. And they say that holding your balance pose, the way to hold that is to fix your eyes at a still spot ahead of you. And I try that. And as a technique, it has merit. But then when I'm in a class, I start looking around to see how other people are holding their poses. Who's in balance? Who's wobbling? Who's just not even doing it? And I invariably lose my own balance because I'm no longer with myself. So the Buddha tells a story about an acrobat team. And this is the story of Medikatalika, the apprentice, and her mentor. And I wanted to read it because it's sometimes nice to read a whole sutta. Suttas are the teachings of the Buddha, and especially the ones that tell a story. So for anyone new to the suttas, these are the teachings that have been collected and handed down for 2,500 years, and there are literally thousands of them. And they are the source material for everything that we practice for all traditions of Buddhism. And they're all different lengths, and this one isn't very long, but it ties into what we're talking about very nicely. And it's called the Sadaka Suta, like Neil Sadaka, but predating him by a couple of millennia. So this is from the Samyutta Nikaya, collected or connected discourses of the Buddha. At one time, the Buddha was staying in the land of the Sumbas, near the town of the Sumbas called Sadaka. There, the Buddha addressed the mendicants, meaning the monks and nuns. Once upon a time, mendicants and acrobats set up his bamboo pole and said to his apprentice, Medikatalika, "Come now, dear Medikatalika, climb up the bamboo pole and stand on my shoulders." "Yes, teacher," she replied. She climbed up the bamboo pole and stood on her teacher's shoulders. Then the acrobat said to Medikatalika, "You look after me, dear Medikatalika, and I'll look after you. That's how guarding and looking after each other will display our skill, collect our fee, and get down safely from the bamboo pole." When he said this, Medikatalika said to her teacher, "That's not how it is, teacher. You should look after yourself, and I'll look after myself. That's how guarding and looking after ourselves will display our skill, collect our fee, and get down safely from the bamboo pole." And so then the Buddha commented, and he said, "That's the way. It's just as Medikatalika said to her teacher, thinking, 'I'll look after myself, you should cultivate mindfulness.' Thinking, 'I'll look after others, you should cultivate mindfulness.' Looking after yourself, you look after others. And looking after others, you look after yourself. And how do you look after others? By looking after yourself? By development, cultivation, and practice of meditation. And how do you look after yourself? By looking after others. By acceptance, harmlessness, love, and compassion." And then he says it again. Thinking, "I'll look after myself, you should cultivate mindfulness. Thinking, I'll look after others, you should cultivate mindfulness. Looking after yourself, you look after others. And looking after others, you look after yourself." So even though Medikatalika was the student, the apprentice, it was her wisdom that the Buddha praised. So the key to maintaining our balance, our equilibrium, even our equanimity, is by bringing the power of mindfulness, the strength of mindfulness, careful attention to our own experience of maintaining balance in the shifting sands, and trusting that this will actually give us the stability that we need to be of benefit to others, to those we love, to those we live with, to our communities, to our world. So another way of putting this is, that famous analogy of putting on your own oxygen mask before assisting others. And the graphics on the airplane card are kind of a teaching in that way, because they actually show the parent putting on their own mask even before helping their child. So it's a deep teaching, courtesy of the Buddha and Delta Airlines. So the Buddha did advise us to be an island unto ourselves, because no one else can do this inner work but me. No one else can balance you internally but you yourself. And no one can know our inner experience in the same way that it is possible for us to know. External teachers, even the Buddha, cannot do the work of taming our minds, of building equanimity, or of skillfully holding what's in need of healing within us. With all the skill that the Buddha had as a teacher, as a fully enlightened being, I don't think that there is a single story in those thousands of suttas that shows him waving a hand and enlightening someone. In all the enlightenment stories that I've read, it happens when the student is ready, because of their own understanding, their own practice, their own application of the Dharma, their own insight. So it may have seemed sudden, but they were ready. The path to full awakening is sometimes described in the suttas as like walking into the ocean, that very long, shallow distance, a very, very gradual slope. And then suddenly a big drop off, many steps that seem insignificant, but are essential to being in the right place and taking that next step into freedom. So this week I came upon the beautiful poem Salvage by Ada Limon. And Ada is our first Latinx poet laureate, our current poet laureate. And if you haven't read her poems before, you're in for a treat. And so this poem, Salvage, is from her book, The Hurting Kind. And I read this poem to close our metta practice on Friday, but I think I can't read it today because this will go on YouTube. But I wanted to share the gist of it, if not the whole beautiful structure and language. So I encourage you to look for it if you'd like. Salvage by Ada Limon. So she writes of finding a burned out madrone tree on a mountainside in Northern California. And as she spends some time examining it, and as she does, she sees that it's half burned and half alive. And she compares that to herself at middle age, this sort of tender between place. And she touches the tree, and then she closes the poem with the line, "And because I cannot apologize to the tree, to my own self, I say, I am sorry. I am sorry I have been so reckless with your life." And it kind of took my breath away. It's the tenderness, the fragility, the ephemerality of all of this, of our experience, of how we take it for granted or spend all of our time trying to make the world conform to what we want, ignoring that, as all the saints and sages and prophets tell us, that the garden is within and needs tending. And I shared this poem with the group, and then a little later I shared it with a friend, and that led to a conversation about what you feel, how you feel when you read that final line, "I am sorry, I have been so reckless with your life." What do you feel? Do you feel the loss, the grieving of the recklessness? And haven't we all been reckless with our lives at times? Or do you feel, or maybe at the same time feel, what comes after? What comes after that insight into preciousness, the precariousness, the fragility of life, and the intention that can arise from that, an intention to love, to live in a different way, to live with appreciation, with what might be the opposite energy to reckless: intentional, caring, loving, appreciative, mindful. Whatever we pay close attention, whenever we pay close attention without judgment, love is present. Discernment may be present. The poet seeing the truth, the insight. But in the poem, I hear tenderness and knowing, but not judgment. Whenever we pay close attention and judgment isn't there, love is present. And I want to offer what I think of as a tender teaching, even a difficult one. But it's a way that the Buddha offered to help us move from that recklessness to that deep tenderness and valuing. And so we may have that very deep insight that, yes, I want to look after myself, and looking after myself, I will look after others. And then there are the practices that can remind us of that intention, that can keep that insight breathing, that can help us bring that into our lives. And one of these practices is called the 5 daily recollections. And I'll be honest, when I first heard this teaching, I thought, no way, not for me, this is way too negative. So if that should come up for you, that is okay. It came up for me probably the first 20 times. Um, so that's kind of a build up. It's really not that terrible. But so the Buddha is talking to the monastics, and he says this: monastics, a person of any gender, a lay person or a renunciate, should often review these 5 subjects. So even though the Buddha is addressing the monastics, he is saying that this is really a teaching for everyone, whether you choose to be a renunciant and live in the forest in a kuti, practice all day, or whether you live with a family or on your own and working in the world. And so he says, a person should often review these 5 subjects. What 5? I am liable to grow old. I am not exempt from old age. A person of any gender, a lay person or a renunciate, should often review this. I am liable to get sick. I am not exempt from sickness. I am liable to die. I am not exempt from death. I must be parted and separated from all I hold dear and beloved. I am the owner of my deeds and heir to my deeds. Deeds are my womb, my relative, and my refuge. I shall be heir of whatever deeds I do, whether good or bad. A person of any gender, a lay person or a renunciant, should often review this. So, not easy to hear, like, bummer, this is heavy, this is not exactly soothing. Why would the Buddha want us to remember all this heavy stuff? Because the Buddha was a realist, and he wasn't seeking to sugarcoat the truth. He wanted us to be free from suffering, to be liberated, and to really know what's happening. And this is the truth of being embodied. No matter how much we try to hang on tight, the reality is that we are in a process of life that never stops. The boat on the internal and external ocean. And the Buddha explains about each of the recollections that it's to our benefit to remember, so that first we give up any illusions or hubris that we are somehow exempt and so can live recklessly and carelessly, like the party will go on forever. And then he asks us also to remember that this is the fate of all beings, all embodied beings. One reflects, it is not just me who is liable to grow old, not being exempt from old age. For all sentient beings grow old according to their nature, as long as they come and go, pass away, and are reborn, or liable to be sick, or die, or be separated from what we hold dear, or have to live with the results of our intentional deeds. When they review this subject often, the path is born in them. They cultivate, develop, and make much of it. By doing so, they give up the fetters and eliminate the underlying tendencies. So when we really face this, we realize we are not going to find lasting happiness in a body that is changing, decaying, becoming sick, in things that we cannot hold on to, that we cannot grasp, that are not really ours. And maybe we don't need reminders of some of these, maybe we are living with age and sickness and loss every day and we know it. But the intention in the teaching is to take nothing for granted, to live appreciatively, intentionally, mindfully, and turn our attention in the direction of the luminous mind, the self beyond the self. And I don't want to use the word self, but beyond the self, beyond this idea of I. And then remembering that we share that fragility with all beings. Because life itself isn't fragile. The stream of life and the resilience of it on this planet is incredibly strong, even though we're doing our best to kill it. Life belongs to life, and it keeps rolling on. But on the level of individual beings where we are, it's incredibly fragile. And so this is a relative truth on the level of self-identifying beings. So my teacher, Lee Brasington, invites his students to look at this teaching on another level by highlighting the I. The conceptualized I is liable to old age, to become sick, to die. And the Buddha is inviting us to see throughout all of his teachings that the I is a construct. Very real to us, very real, and yet not the ultimate truth. So what does all of this do? Does it feel unbalancing? Or does it feel like an invitation to tend to our own balance, like it did to Medikatalika, the apprentice? Or is it an invitation to see the places where we've been reckless with our experience and to commit to hold our lives with clear eyes, truth, intention? To know our lives as the great teachers that they are. So Aya Kema, who I quote often and who's actually Lee's teacher, says many times in her writings and Dharma talks, life is an adult education school. Life is an adult education school, she says. If we look at it in this light, we see it correctly. If we expect it to be geared to pleasure, we are bound to be disappointed. So it's in the interest of physical organisms to stay alive, to seek pleasure, to avoid pain and danger, to try and live forever. So of course, being physical organisms, we grasp and cling. If you were designing a being to live in this world, you'd probably program it this way. It makes sense. But we also have within us this deep longing to connect, to be more than grasping, clinging entities, struggling and fighting. We long to connect, to give, to care for. And this, it feels to me, it feels like this is a built-in gateway that we have into our own possibility of diminishing that separate sense of I, that conceptualized I that dies and is sick and is separated from what it loves. It's built into us, our own possibility of liberation and the way that we really deep down want that for all. So that's the way, said the Buddha. It's just as Medikatalika said to her teacher, thinking I'll look after myself, you should cultivate mindfulness meditation. Thinking I'll look after others, you should cultivate mindfulness meditation. Looking after yourself, you look after others. And looking after others, you look after yourself. And how do you look after others? By looking after yourself. By development, cultivation, and the practice of meditation. And how do you look after yourself? By looking after others, by acceptance, harmlessness, love, and compassion. And I'm going to just paste that into the chat in case anyone wants that. A very good friend once advised me to give from your overflow. And we fill our reservoir through our intentional practice, those gradual steps along the continental shelf. This is what the Buddha is saying here, that our personal practice, when we view it rightly, is looking after others, and that the expression of our care and compassion in the world is looking after ourselves. So imagine a world where every person spent even 10 minutes a day sitting quietly, remembering and reconnecting to their deepest intentions, remembering what is really, really important to them, recollecting those 5 daily things, and recollecting that they share them with all other beings. So I think it would look a little different. Maybe it would be a little more in balance, a little less reckless and oppositional. I think it would look a lot different, actually. So I'm starting here. And all of us are always starting every day. So let's take a moment to just reflect. Let the words settle as they will. Looking after others, I will look after myself. Looking after others, I will look after myself. And looking after others, just would love to ask for any comments or thoughts that come up for you around this, and if that's a difficult teaching, those 5 daily recollections, or maybe something you are already incorporating, or anything you'd like to share. Okay. So we are constantly being taught in so many ways. Everything that happens is our teacher. Life is an adult education school, as Aya says. And to look at it as anything else is probably going to lead to more pain than necessary. So may our practice be a source of strength and balance for us. May our community be strong and well together. May how we are in the world be of benefit. May all beings be free. May all beings be liberated. May all beings know peace. So thank you, dear ones. I appreciate it so much. And don't forget Mary's day long on the 30th if you can come to that. It's really great for keeping this process of rebuilding our community. All right, take care. Good night.